Hi, it's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, so that you can have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I've shown you why your body language may be your biggest obstacle to peace of mind, control, power and influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You can read, watch or listen to last week's update by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog, I want to share with you the elephant in the room, or how the intensive care team is making decisions whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. First of all, I want to thank you for being part of the IntensiveCareHotline.com community, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We've had an increased following in recent months, and the blog is becoming very popular, with the number of visitors by far exceeding our expectations. Therefore, a big thank you to our readers, listeners and followers. Having a loved one critically ill in intensive care is one of the biggest challenges there is during your lifetime. It's nothing short of being a life-changing experience, and it's often a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And because you are having a loved one critically ill in intensive care, it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and you and your family need to have as much information at hand as possible. In fact, you need to arm yourself with some weapons or even heavy guns, so to speak, because after all, you don't want to get this once-in-a-lifetime experience wrong. You also want to get an unfair advantage compared to other families of critically ill patients in intensive care. If you want all of that, you have come to the right place, period. You see, the sad reality is that 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care have no peace of mind, they have no control, no power and no influence whatsoever. Those families of critically ill patients in intensive care have no idea that peace of mind, control, power and influence are even an option if you know what to do and if you are discovering the right information. And I know it's not your fault, because you and your family have got those long-held beliefs that intensive care doctors and nurses are smart, they are trustworthy, and they have gone to university, so they must have all the answers. In fact, society has taught us for centuries that we can trust health professionals. That's what I thought and believed as well when I first started working in intensive care as a registered nurse, only to find that there are so many things happening behind the scenes, and that there are so many politics, dynamics, intrigue and power play that impact on the care and treatment critically ill patients receive or don't receive. And because of all those dynamics at play, wouldn't it be worthwhile if somebody told you about the elephant in the room in intensive care? Wouldn't it be worthwhile for you and your family to know how the intensive care team is making decisions whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? Wouldn't it be worthwhile for you to know how you can make sure that what you see is always what you get? You see, every decision, every sentence uttered, every position of your critically ill loved one's diagnosis and prognosis, and every perception the intensive care team has about your critically ill loved one's case is dominated by the elephant in the room in intensive care. This is especially important for you to know if your critically ill loved one is in one of the following situations, such as they are very unstable and in a very critical condition, they are in a life-threatening situation, they are in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, and that's including severe head and brain injuries as well, or if they are approaching their end of life in intensive care. The elephant in the room in intensive care is always dominated by what's happening behind the scenes. You see, the reality and the fact of the matter is that if you have come to intensive care because you want to visit your loved one who is critically ill, the wheels that are in motion are beyond your control, and you can only have peace of mind, control, power and influence if you know what's really happening, and only if you know and understand what's happening behind the scenes. After more than 15 years of intensive care nursing in 3 different countries, and after working with and looking after literally thousands of critically ill patients and their families, I have seen and learned many valuable lessons that I'm happily sharing with you here, because I believe in transparency and I believe in empowerment for families of critically ill patients. And once again, the elephant in the room in intensive care is visible for doctors and for nurses in intensive care, but is not visible for families of critically ill patients unless they have been made aware of it. You see, the intensive care team has an agenda they need to drive, and they are having interests that go way beyond your critically ill loved one's diagnosis and prognosis, and that's what I refer to as the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room that you need to know about, especially if your critically ill loved one is in one of those difficult and challenging situations that I mentioned before, are things like: does the intensive care team need the bed for another patient that is needing an intensive care bed? Or does the intensive care team think that continuing treating your critically ill loved one is making them money? Or is it putting pressure on the intensive care unit's budget? Or do they think that they are better off by treating other patients, and therefore suggest or quote unquote sell to you a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment as being quote unquote in the best interest of your critically ill loved one? Also, does the intensive care team think that if a critically ill patient is dying in intensive care, that they can continue treating this particular patient for a little bit longer and do medical research? Can they do that by quote unquote selling to the families that there is hope of recovery even if there isn't, and therefore suffering is unnecessarily prolonged? Keep in mind, medical research generally attracts 5, 6 or even 7-figure dollar funding per year. Also, how can the intensive care team efficiently position a long-term stay in intensive care so that they can still get funding for this patient, and so that they don't have to mention other viable and genuine alternatives, such as home care for long-term intensive care patients? Check out intensivecareathome.com.au for more information if your loved one is a long-term patient in intensive care. These and many other questions and scenarios are the elephant in the room, and the intensive care team will consider them one way or another, and it manifests in the conversations they are having with you and your family, and it may also manifest in the conversations they may not have with you. The grim reality is that you and your family, generally speaking, have no idea what's happening behind the scenes in intensive care, and therefore you and your family are basically at the mercy of the intensive care team. That's not a good position to be in, and your family's job is to quickly educate yourself so that you can get peace of mind, control, power and influence fast, whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. How do you do that? And how can you have peace of mind, control, power and influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? You get to that all-important feeling of peace of mind, control, power and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get peace of mind, real power and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free reports, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. You will discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. You will discover how to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle, and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 killer tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to peace of mind, control, power, and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care, and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care. And it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again in another update next week. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section, where we answer your questions, or send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.